guys, we talk a lot about rewiring the brain for recovery, but what does that actually look like in practice? So, how do you go from understanding neuroplasticity to actually using it to turn pain and other symptoms off? And what happens when you hit a wall and nothing seems to be shifting? If you're new here, I'm Raelan Agle, and this is where we cut through the noise and talk about what's actually working for ME/CFS and long COVID and many other chronic conditions. And joining me in this episode is Dr. Tovah Goldfine, a powerhouse in the world of mind-body healing. She is tuning in from Pardes Chana, Israel, although originally from Philadelphia. She has spent over 40 years helping people break free from chronic pain and autoimmune symptoms using cutting-edge neuroplasticity techniques such as pain reprocessing therapy. But what makes her stand out isn't just her expertise, it's her ability to translate the science into real, actionable recoveries for the clients that she works with. Dr. Tovah is the host of TMS Roundtable, her information-packed YouTube channel, where every week she shares insights from top experts and doctors and real-life recovery stories. And right now, she's bringing the best of all of those insights to you as we talk mind-body connection in a way that makes it click and leads to real, lasting change. So let's dive in. Dr. Tovah, how incredible to have you here. Thank you for doing this.
I'm happy to be here. I'm so happy you found me.
So much to dive into, but I always like to start out with hearing about how did you get into this focus with your work? Because so many physicians are not in this area. So tell us about that.
And also, I am a chiropractor for 40 years. And so some people are like, so what, stick with chiropractic. It was enough. You're helping people, but there was something much greater to learn about the body. And it's not just about the disc and the muscle. It's much more about the brain and the immune system. So, but I was gravitating towards this field as a young child. I was always searching. I was that kind of sensitive child, always searching and searching. And at age 13, my mother developed multiple sclerosis. And as most children with a parent that has a disease, it changes the trajectory of your life in many ways. And I was one of four, and I was the only girl. So it created another level of intensity on my part and between my mother and I. And so she had this type of MS that goes on and on for about 25 years. And the body just keeps degenerating and generating. And all of a sudden you're a vegetable and your eyes blink and we can't wait till you die because that was the kind of childhood I had. And I remember not thinking about being a chiropractor then, but thinking about like how I can help her. And I remember they did macrobiotics. They ate brown rice and umebochi plums. But that was my mom's life. And at some point during her illness, I was in college and I kept dropping out of majors, not knowing what I wanted to do, finding myself, losing myself, finding myself. And then I traveled to Israel to live on a kibbutz for a few months and then came home and was still searching and hurt my shoulder jogging. And somebody said, do you want to go see some chiropractor? And I was like, what's that? Sounds healthy. Sounds like it's not invasive. I go visit this chiropractor. He hires me to work in his office because his current assistant was going to school. 4 years later, I'm in school. 8 years later, I have a degree. And so you never know what's going to happen. I had dropped out of college. I'd been in a dozen majors. You never know where that place is going to come and where your destiny or where you get the oar in the boat and where you're going to take it. So I loved being a chiropractor. I loved helping. I loved, going to school. I wasn't a great student in high school, but when I really found what I loved, I was getting A's. And I loved studying about the body. I loved understanding the muscles. It was fascinating to me. So I'm a chiropractor, but I'm always understanding where's the source of, it's the disc, it's the muscle. But what's going on with you? And chiropractors in general are more sensitive doctors. They sort of look at you, not just your disc. But in the meantime, one thing led to another, and I began to get more into the mind body. I remember reading Norman Cousins' book, Anatomy of an Illness. And he wasn't a doctor. He was a an editor, and went to Russia on some big trip. He was an editor of a big magazine, and he comes back from the trip with his wife, and he's in the hospital with some inflamed joints. So he starts to think, wait a minute, we're both in the trip. We both had a stressful experience in Russia. Why am I having a reaction in my body? He's already thinking out of the box. Short story, and everyone knows his story. He's in the hospital, and he watches a Three Stooges movie. And all of a sudden, the next morning, his sed rate goes down. And all of a sudden, the doctor's like, how come your sed rate, something about your joints, your inflammation. And so he starts to understand, wait a minute, I laughed. And I saw something change in my blood. So he started to think, and it's a great story. He leaves the hospital. He watches Three Stooges movies for a few months, takes vitamin C. He has this ankylosing spondylitis, which is an inflammatory disease in your spine, in your joints. And he heals himself through the innate intelligence of the body. And the innate intelligence is what we hear about when we study the quantum physics. Joe Dispenza talks about the innate intelligence. Bruce Lipton talks about the innate. And in chiropractic school, you talk about an innate intelligence that's always striving to heal. So this was my beginning. So I'm 40 years a gentle chiropractor, and I do wonderful work, and I do a lot of rehabilitation, and I'm a Nordic walking coach, and I get in the water, and I do all this. But 20 years ago, I start to explore more of the mind-body. And I bump into the John Sarno work by mistake. And it's a great story because I call the producer, and I'm thinking I'm going to get the producer. Well, he answers the phone because, a lot of these movies, the guys on the, they're accessible. It's not like we're dealing with Hollywood. These are people that are writing real stories. So there was a movie about Dr. John Sarno called All the Rage. So I get in touch with the producer. We get friends. He comes to Israel. We show the movie. One thing leads to another. And now it's 20 years that I'm diving into understanding that all chronic pain is in the brain. Okay, acute pain is processed here. If I hit you in the knee, you'd have acute pain and it would be processed here. And you get better. Chronic pain is processed here. It's processed in the same place as anger. These are core feelings that sort of sit in your body: anger, fear, shame, sadness, guilt. So chronic pain is processed where these emotions. So we have studied that pain is an emotion, and that's another topic. Pain is an emotion, and it's been studied. So I like the research. It's a little woo-woo sounding. What do you mean my feelings have something to do with my healing? What do you mean my brain is protecting me? So there's science all to prove this, and you probably know that yourself. So I delved into the science, and I became neuroplasticity is it means the brain can change. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not a neurologist. But I began to study neuroplasticity and how we use the methods of changing the brain to help heal chronic pain and autoimmune disease. And that's that's the real short elevator story.
Okay, I'm going to have to back you up on one of those things because I've never heard anyone say before that pain is an emotion. So what does that mean?
Well, look, because chronic pain is an emotion, because it's expressed in your body, the pain is real. But what is the cause of most chronic pain? What is the cause of, this is an incredible study. This was a true story. It's called The Tale of Two Nails. I can send it out to anyone who wants it. There's a guy, he's on a construction site. Gets a nail in his boot. And he's freaking out. He's screaming in so much pain. And his fellow workers are trying to find something. They get the first aid kit and they try to inject him with something. Nothing works. They call the ambulance. They put him in there. They inject him with something else. Take him to the hospital. They cut the boot off. The nail is between the toes. So his experience with that nail in his boot immediately created an entire drama and narrative that he had this excruciating pain. So that's an emotional reaction. That's one example. Another man he was in a construction site. He gets a nail. He's shooting nails in a plank. He gets something in his face. 2 weeks later, he goes to the dentist. He's got a nail piercing his brain. He has no pain. So we understand pain, chronic pain, by our relationship with it. That's one explanation. Plus, they've studied that when there's chronic pain, it lights up in the amygdala. And that's exactly what the same place it lights up when you're sad, fearful, rage, angry. So they began to understand that, like, when we're sad, we cry, and when we're in pain, we feel sensations in our body. And then when you study the neuroplastic work, and you might have heard of this in your healing, is that when the body senses a threat or an attack, like an autoimmune, it begins to protect. It's sensing a lion's coming, and all it is your mom's calling. Or all it is some memory that's causing your brain to think. We go into fight and flight all the time, but we come out of it. But people with autoimmune disease, they stay in it. And then the stress hormones and the chemical changes and the cortisol and all that stuff starts to shift, and we start to develop weakness, imbalance, a lack of homeostasis. And I do follow Joe Dispenza's work. These chemicals and stresses can hurt us and cause disease, and the same chemicals can heal us. So I come from this place of that, chronic pain is expressed emotionally in our body. And one of the ways to bring recovery is to understand what we're feeling. And I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but I study with a dozen doctors, and they'll tell you about how pain is an emotion. They might not say it like me. Like, I work with this gastroenterologist. He's a real straight guy, Dr. David Clark. He runs a wonderful association for chronic pain in America. It's helps people all the time. He's this.
I had him on the channel recently. Yeah, he was just recently on. I can link his interview. He's amazing. Yeah.
Clark quote. And I've had him on about 7 or 8 shows, and he's just straight. And I asked him about these gastroenterologists and gastritis and Crohn's and diverticulitis, and he's like, Tovah, my answer. Ask that person, besides taking their anti-inflammatory, besides doing whatever they do, ask that person to be a butterfly on the wall of their childhood, and ask your client, do they have compassion? What do they see? And he brings the whole compassion piece and the whole love yourself and the whole accept yourself. And he's really, really straight. So these doctors that you've obviously met, or Dr. Clark's associates and my teachers, are talking about how the way that we recover from chronic pain is to have a relationship with our unconscious mind, and to connect the unconscious mind to the conscious mind so we know what's going on. So this is a little bit off your question, because this is kind of like just one of the methods that we use to help people. But yeah, pain is an emotion. Chronic pain is an emotion. And as you know, whenever we're in pain, acute, chronic, we have an emotional experience as well as in a physical experience. And so we address both, and the recovery is more profound and more permanent, rather than just mask the symptom or just treat the symptom. So we, just like you do, we treat the person, and the person is a real human being, and no two people are alike, no two thumbprints are alike. So we have to address the person, the personality, how they feel, how they think, whether they're a perfectionist, whether they're a people pleaser. All these different things have to do with their emotional state. And we're learning more and more about how emotions are affecting our chemistry.
So one of the things I've been really excited to talk to you about is because you have this incredible way of translating all of this into recovery success with the patients and people that you work with. Because when you explain it, it can sound a bit impossible. Like, oh, you just need to have a relationship with your unconscious mind. And people are walking away thinking, how on earth am I supposed to do that?
I think she's smoking.
So how do you get people, or how do you support them? Or, what does that actually look like for people facing all these chronic symptoms? They're like, okay, I'm going to be a butterfly on the wall and get into
good question.
How do we do that?
Because what they have found, and what Dr. Clark will probably talk about, he'll talk about that a lot of people who end up with chronic pain or chronic fatigue or autoimmune symptoms, and they're not getting better. Look, I'm all about the medical system. You want to go to the medical community and get better, please. But if you can't, and you have a medically unexplained symptom and you're not getting what you need, come and try this part of the medical model. Because, if you can't get help there, then we can integrate and work together and help you. Go get your chemo, but understand your emotional so this is how I've met people that have healed everything from cancer to even MS. A lot of people are recovering from MS, to arthritis, to diverticulitis, to Crohn's disease, to all sorts of chronic pain, migraines, tinnitus. And they're doing it through these type of methods. And here's the answer to your question. When the body's in chronic pain, the body's in a state of threat. Okay, the body's in a state of protection. Okay? And so you're in a state of fight or flight, which again, like I said, we can go in and out of that. We do that. We're in a car, we get like rear-ended, and then we're like, okay. But how many of us, we stay in that state of fight and flight because the brain is somehow still protecting us. And that's because it's somehow still getting messages from your body that there's a threat. And all it is, your husband calling or your child's late. Look, and sometimes there's other threats. Like I've been living in a year of a war, but I'm not in physical pain. I go to the gym with my anger. I go to sleep with my loneliness. I have coffee with my fear. So I'm connected that I'm feeling uncomfortable, but doesn't have to express itself in physical pain. So that's another little cue of like having a relationship with what you're really feeling. Because what Dr. Sarno discovered is that when we repress our feelings and don't acknowledge them or have a relationship with them or just be with them, they will cause the brain through the networks, and this part I'm not sure I can talk about so easily, that will cause the brain to believe there's a lion coming, okay? And all it is you're angry or you're sad or you're remembering something from the trauma. And that's why I brought up Dr. Clark's butterfly on the wall, because most people with chronic pain and autoimmune disease, a lot of them have trauma from their life. It's a study called Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a big study. And they look at the percentage of people that do have chronic pain and autoimmune disease. What kind of big trauma, a big T, did they have? Now, we all have trauma. We're human beings. We have that disease called being human. But how do we play out our trauma? How do we live with our memories? How do we take our past, integrate it in the present, and live a good life? So this is the big question. So, for example, in answer to your question, I get excited about this stuff, so calm me down, is individuals need to have knowledge. Knowledge is important about, the neuroplastic work, knowledge about, I believe in the quantum physics and understanding the innate intelligence that the body's not attacking you, it's protecting you, it's not punishing you, and having an understanding, not like I'm a victim of my body. So this is knowledge. Two, we've studied this, and this has absolutely been researched neurologically. When we journal or expressive write, not on our computer, not on our phone, when we literally take a pen and write, they've studied that when you separate the thoughts from here to a paper, something neurological happens. Something changes. Not even that, but you release it. And some of the docs recommend you write it and throw it out, like you move it on. And this is expressive writing journaling. It's not just like writing a diary. It's neurological, it's chemical. Another third thing, and this is very big in the quantum world, especially with Joe Dispenza work, is meditation. Now, I'm not talking about Dalai Lama on the mountain. I'm talking about mindfulness, awareness, compassion. I just listened to something, and I even scripted the YouTube, so I wanted to print it and say it. They did a study, because he's doing a lot of the studies, on gratitude, that when somebody's grateful, gracious, gratitude, they're noticing the chemicals. They're noticing the blood changing. They're noticing, we know with sound healing, it will change your blood, it will change the way your blood's flowing. And this is all another, we know when we speak to ourselves, we talk to a plant. This is all another field. It's all the same thing of the incredible innate power we have to heal ourselves. So meditation, knowledge, expressive writing, mindfulness, awareness, self-compassion is chemical. Self-compassion is a science. You need to get this woman, Christian Neff, on your broadcast. She may not be so available, but let's talk about compassion. This is a chemical reaction when you are self-compassionate. And we all know how to be compassionate to a puppy, to a new baby, but a lot of us did not learn how to be compassionate. We didn't see our parents doing it. And I'm a grandmother, and like we all make mistakes. So this is something we have to work a muscle of self-compassion and self-love. A lot of the times the body's protecting us because it's in conflict. I'm saying one thing, but I'm feeling another. And Dr. Gabriel Matai, his book is called When the Body Says No. It's a bestseller, When the Body Says No, because the body's saying no because you keep saying yes, yes, yes. And the body's in conflict. This is a whole nother, topic. And so some people can relate to that and understand, yeah, I'm a people pleaser. Yeah, I'm doing what I don't want to do. So we help people do what they have to do, but not defy or deny themselves. It becomes this sort of pain psychology. And the neuroplastic work, which is so fascinating, it's called pain reprocessing therapy, advanced certified in it. And it came from this Dr. John Sarno work. And Dr. Clark is head of this association about studying the neuroplasticity and helping coaches and helping to educate anyone. And neuroplasticity, it's called pain reprocessing therapy. And basically, there's a movie called Pain Brain. Pain Brain. It's an incredible movie about how, and it was scientists saying, like, I don't buy this in the movie. And during the movie, they're showing how that if I speak to my brain, because what's my brain? It's a piece of flesh, but it's a lizard brain, centuries old. And it has a way that it's programmed. So it has a certain way, and forget even childhood, it learns another way, but it's in a protective mode. It's always striving for protection. So we have to bring safety and calm to a brain that's doing its job. Does that make sense?
It does. And you've called out something that's really important, I think, because I get a lot of or some comments from people, frustrated, understandably, people who are struggling with ME/CFS or long COVID. And they say things like, I'm so tired of hearing about emotions. Quit gaslighting my real physical condition. Like, this is garbage and you're wasting our time. But we understand now, and the science is there, that our brain processes emotional and physical threats in the exact same way.
Absolutely.
And most of
Great
us
point.
weren't even brought up to think of emotions as threats, but if we go back to thinking about we're meant to live in communities, we're meant to be a part of a group, and our brain can process strong, scary emotions like rage and shame, like a threat, like a person chasing us with a gun.
Yeah.
So it's just shifting our thinking like emotions can be threats.
Yeah.
So it's not just looking at the obvious threats in the world we think of, but it's these other components as well. And they bring on symptoms to alert us.
Exactly. To piggyback that into your listeners, really, I mean, your pain is real. We're not here to deny pain. The pain is real, but any of us want to get to the cause. I want you to live a quality life. So I want to get to the cause of your pain. So I'm not going to put a needle and give you steroids and give you 20 adjustments to get rid of your pain. You might feel better, but I don't want you going down a rabbit hole. So what I learned from Dr. David Hanscom, who's another doc he's wonderful. He used to be a spinal surgeon, and he's now doing this work full time. He studied, and this is a fact that lots of probably neurologists and neurosurgeons know and psychiatrists know, the body can handle physical pain much better. It's not set up to deal with emotional pain. And I'm like, what do you mean? But that's what they've studied. Like, I can handle a hit. I can handle a finger burning on the stove. I can handle surgery. But when it comes to this emotional, and just like what you said, so it becomes, so what we're studying it together. It's not separate. We're going to have to study together and give you a more profound healing, a more permanent healing, and put you in the pilot seat by understanding the mind and body are intimately connected. And that was Dr. John Sarno's statement. The mind and body are intimately connected. And the medical model usually separates it.
You said something else that is a really important one to address, I think, because I get quite a few people, a heartbreaking number of people reaching out saying, okay, so I keep hearing that this is a danger response, a threat response. It's about, working with emotions. It's about feeling safe. But I live someplace where there's a war going on, or I live in an unsafe environment. I don't feel safe hardly ever. So how am I ever going to feel better? Is there any hope for me to feel better when I live someplace where it isn't safe? So I'd be lying if I said I felt safe.
So, that's a good question. And the fact is, we can be under threat and still bring safety to our body, because that's how many soldiers, that's how they're trained. And so we're not soldiers, we're human beings, we're the laymen. But, I gave an example of how I've been living in a year of war, and I've not ever been personally threatened, but, I've been around it and my country, and it's been a very painful year. Please God, it's going to end. And so I understood it from a very, very different perspective. Now, the question is, when we're living around threat and we're not directly threatened, we have to understand our relationship with fear. I'm sure this comes up, because it's the fear that's hurting them more than the threat. It's the fear of the threat more than the actual threat. So my fear, and these people, unless there's a gun, God forbid, at their head, okay, and then their brain will put them in fight and flight and able to fight. The story about, like, if you're running and there's a line after you and you trip, you're going to keep running even if you broke your ankle. Your brain will decide what's the most important. It's called the cellular network. Your brain will decide what's important. So we can do that with our brain. We can decide what's important. And this particular person is living in a threatful situation. They can learn to bring calm and safety. And this is this neuroplastic pain reprocessing therapy. We can learn to literally bring my sympathetic nervous system into parasympathetic. And it's big words, but I can teach any layman that, because people are doing that with a baby, with a puppy. We're bringing so we have that ability. We just kind of give it the power away. Like, this sounds so hard, but if your life depended on it, you'd be able to do it. And once you start doing it, it becomes a habit. And then you built a new pathway. And all of a sudden, that's your default, to bring calm and safety. And so many of us are helping others. We always say, well, I can help others, but I don't know how to do it to myself. So you're close. This particular person just needs to believe and trust that they have that ability to bring safety and calm, because under safety and calm, they can make better decisions, have more energy, get out of the place of threat. They say Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book, doesn't matter, he was in the Holocaust, but his famous statement is, between a thought and an action, you have a moment to make a decision. And in that decision, there's freedom. That's the quote. Okay, Viktor Frankl. Between a thought and an action, you have a moment, and you can make a decision. And that decision could free you. And it kept him alive, in a concentration camp. And his stories and we hear stories all about this. I don't want people to think you have to be a Dalai Lama on the mountain to heal a disease or pain. You have that power. You have the ability. In fact, the pain and the disease is sometimes your power, your superpower. And you are an example, and I don't really know your story. So part of the people I meet are just regular people who make a decision. And when you make a decision, your brain's like, okay, I get this. I get who's the conductor here. And then the brain gets to be a brain, and you're in control.
Yeah, I love this. And also, we're learning that all types of fear can bring on symptoms, but it's typically a very specific type of fear that fuels the continuation of those symptoms, so that makes them chronic. So any sort of threat assessment, danger assessment can bring those symptoms on, but typically it's the fear of those symptoms themselves as you move forward that keep them going. So that message of safety doesn't necessarily have to be that my country is safe or that the world is safe, but that I am safe in my body, and my body is okay, and my body isn't broken, and I am not dying, and I'm not falling apart. Right. So, just kind of bringing that circle of safety to here, which I think is just a different way of saying, I love how you explained it. It's,
You're very smart. You're very smart. And so we have like a little program, a little plan. And for some people, we always say, go to the evidence. Go to the evidence. You had the MRI. You had the CAT scan. Nothing's broken. I'm telling you, 40 years of chiropractor, it's not the whiplash. The disc causes pain for 2, 3, maybe 4 months. And then it's not the disc anymore. This is what we're studying. It's not the disc. So we understand through the evidence, you're okay. Number one, you're okay. There's no evidence that something's broken, that you need to be fixed, that something physical can heal you. So it's kind of like you build this trust. Okay, evidence. 2, yes, I am triggered. I am scared. We're not here to not deny feelings. anger is a healthy feeling. Are you expressing it in a healthy way? So you have fear. Okay, fear. I see that you're here. It's a kind of a habit. I'm reacting, and maybe I need to respond rather than go into reaction. It's reaction. Let me go and breathe. Do you know the kind of chemicals that are released when we breathe deep, diaphragmatic breathing? And I studied this in chiropractic school. Inside of you is a pharmacy of cannabis, opioids, heroin, anti-inflammatory, anti-muscle relaxers, anti-depression. Everything is inside of you, ready to be released when you breathe deeply and you secrete those positive stress hormones. So when we breathe deeply, we calm down, and some of us can go into that place quicker than others. And sometimes we just got to ride the wave. We just got to kind of be like, I'm just going to be triggered. So I'm going to just take my trigger. They say fear it and do it anyway, or take the fear with you, because it's a good point. Fear is in our mind. We've created a story, a narrative. And some of us become a little addicted to that. And then we start to look at that and say, oh, I get that. So we start to understand ourselves. And I love the 12-step work, because once we begin to accept unconditionally, even the part of me I don't like, even the people pleaser, even the part of me, the perfectionist, I can accept and love that part unconditionally. And when we do accept it, we can begin to evolve and change. And let that, and move from that addiction. That's what the 12-step program. And I love the book, Break the Habit of Being Yourself. Like sometimes we have to evolve, not change, but to evolve in order to live the life that we chose. Because disease and chronic pain can become your enemy, or you're a victim, or it can become what propels you to move forward. And look what it's done for you.
I love that message of accepting all of the parts of you, because there is such power in knowing that you are perfect in this moment with all of these pieces of you, all the different things, not judging them as good or bad or needing to change. And it's okay to have goals. It's okay to want to learn how to better thrive in life. But it all starts when you start in a place right now where you're like, this, perfection, good, accepted exactly as it is.
Yeah.
It's so freeing.
Yeah. And when you said as it is, we're talking about the present moment.
Yeah.
Do you know that in the present moment, and this is not woo-woo, you will, if you're in the moment and you're actually watching your breathing and just in this moment, which we all can do for a few seconds, you won't have any pain. You won't have any symptoms. You'll be absolutely in the most, blissful place. And we can practice that muscle. We can build that muscle of pulling ourselves back into the moment, and so we come out of the moment. So go back in, go to yoga. We don't learn about this on a yoga mat. We learn about it, on the highway. We learn about it in the most stressful moments, but we get to practice, and we see that we're not a victim of our circumstances. Look, Corona, gave us the greatest health anxiety that any of us ever had. I like to call health anxiety health sensitivity, because people like you and me, and I've had symptoms, and all of our community are sensitive, strong human beings. They're highly intelligent people. They're connected deeply to themselves in a way, but there's a little missing link. And they're tripping up on themselves. But health anxiety is a health sensitivity. Let's channel that sensitivity to work for our community.
I am excited because this is a really great opportunity to ask you this question, to have someone here on the show who is an expert in the body and looking at structural abnormalities. And you'd said earlier that, sometimes 3-4 months later, that disc problem or whatever it is no longer the cause of the pain. And I have quite a few people reach out to me saying, this neuroplasticity stuff isn't going to work, this brain retraining, this nervous system, because my tests show that I have these different things in my body. So that's not going to fix that. Or will this work for me despite scans or things showing some things off?
Yeah.
So it's
a good answer. And, again, I believe, and this is where Doc Clark and I sometimes will smile at each other and wink because we're disagreeing, and I mean, he has the right to be very straight now. I'm a few shades of gray because I have met people who have healed cancer, and we know people that their tumors have shrunk, and we know people that they took a blood test one day and it changed a month later because of something. Like, we know this. And like I said, I don't want these people to be some foreign thing of like, that's not me. So anything that's going on in the human body, first of all, physically, physiologically, chemically, it's an imbalance in the body. There's something in balance. Your body was made perfect. And I only use that word around God. Okay, but your body was made and you were born pretty clear, pretty together. Okay, we come into this world, and then there's also what happened in utero, which we won't talk about, what happened whenever. So the point is, you come into this world, and your body has the solution. Your body was well, and then it got unwell. So it knows how to be well. That's a little spiritual. Okay. Also, this is where I dive into someone else's like research. Well, I'm not a researcher, but I work with a woman here in Israel. She's a Russian scientist. And her father had a horrible disease, and they said, it's genetic. He's going to die in 10 years. And he died in 10 years. So she's thinking, wait a minute, is that my future? Is that my karma? And she began to understand the word, the doctor says, you're going to die. And sometimes we go home and we die. The doctor says, hey, wait a minute. I think there's something we can do here. Let's figure this out together. And all of a sudden you feel hope, and hope is chemical and belief is chemical. So this Russian scientist starts to get involved in this mind-body work, and she does research on 100 people that have healed everything from A to Z. And she asks them, what was the common denominator? Or she discovers in her research the common denominator of what healed. They made a decision that they were going to heal. That's a chemical, physiological, neurological, spiritual, psychological, physical decision. It's not just they prayed, they made a decision. And then they did some of this, the neuroplastic, the meditation, the other somatic methods. Maybe they got chemo. I'm not against chemo. I have a friend and client who had chemotherapy, healed a huge tumor that almost killed her. She said, I'm going to go into the chemotherapy and call it chemo ecstasy. I'm going to prepare what I'm going to do with my hair. I'm going to prepare the wig. And she had 3 radiations, and she smoked a lot of marijuana, she'll tell you, and she healed a tumor that just about killed her. And it shrunk and shrunk and shrunk because of her emotional relationship with the chemo. So I'm talking about integrating medicine. I'm not just one way or the other. I like the combination of all the worlds. So in this research, 100 people healed all kinds of diseases because they made the decision. They did not negotiate with their brain, their doctor, their nervous system. And they went into this healing journey like you did, and they came out on the other end. And I call it like having a love affair with your body. I work with a heart doctor. He's an incredibly beautiful Christian Arab heart doctor here in Israel. He decided to stop working with the heart and got into helping people with cancer and this energy, this deep, energetic, beautiful spiritual wash that he does. Very scientific, but could sound woo-woo to somebody. He calls cancer a cry of the soul. Now, it depends what you decide that tumor is going to do to you, or that blood test is going to do to you. You have to have a relationship. And thank God with doctors like Dr. Clark and like Dr. Hanscom and like Dr. Sarno and other doctors that I work with that treat you, your condition, whether it's chronic, acute, and they're going to tell you, look, you can heal. They're not going to sell you, like a bottle of potion and say, stop going to chemo. But I'm about engaging a human being with the disease into their healing process to say, let's partner together. And, again, like in your world, I'm just meeting people healing from everything. So how can I come on here and be like, well, no, I don't think that can heal because the doctor, I have to say, do you have a will? Do you have a desire? Are you driven? Do you have a motivation like to live? And some of us will just die because that's our karma, or that's and I know someone will be like, the person tried and they did everything and they still died. And I'm like, that's not for me to speak about. I wasn't there. But everyone has a doctor within. And I think we're not taught that, and we're not encouraged, and we're not building that muscle. And that's why you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, because people need to have that knowledge. We can't keep it for us.
This is so powerful. And I love this because you've shared some of the more extreme cases of when people can make a very justifiable case for feeling hopeless. But even in those cases, there are so many cases of people who do get better. But fortunately, for the vast majority of people out there, they aren't in those extreme situations. And an important thing that I've learned, over these past years is that there's no aging adult on this planet that you could send in for a head-to-toe scan who isn't going to come back with something in their brain, something in their spine, some latent viruses in their body, some little things going on. And we're seeing that there's very little correlation between the level of structural, abnormalities in the body and the level and severity of chronic symptoms that people are experiencing. So you might have things coming up on your test, but that doesn't mean that it's even necessarily the cause of your symptoms anymore. So yeah, I just love that message that there is no hopeless case. And the doctors I interview say that this approach applies to every condition that exists. There is no health condition that, working with your nervous system, working with your brain isn't going to impact. It's just how big of a piece of that puzzle that approach is.
Oh, I'm very happy to hear that. Very happy to hear that.
So what type of work for people out there facing, all these different sorts of conditions, what kind of support do you have available for them? Right. What do you do? How can they learn more?
I work with amazing coaches. Like I interview, like I said, I have a YouTube channel called TMS Roundtable Recovery. And TMS is it's called tension myoneural syndrome. It was Dr. Sarno. He sort of coined this sort of psychosomatic or physiopsychological or neuroplastic condition. And he did a lot of studying, but then the doctors after him, he passed away in his 90s, sort of studied it more. So I keep the TMS Roundtable to honor him. And I go live every week and I meet people and I meet tons of coaches. A lot of them had conditions like yours or chronic pain, and they became coaches. And I work with a handful of doctors. So there's a network, there's a community. And we work with clients, patients. I don't like to call them patients, I like to call them clients. And on their journey, depending on where they're at on their journey. Some of us will be in a group, some of us will work one-on-one. I have an 8-week recovery program that lays the foundation for people because I teach them. I don't want to just fish for them or give them the fish. I push them in the water. I say, fish, I'm right here. I'm holding on to you. I'm helping you, but you're doing it. It's a little tough love. So I have an 8-week program that's been very successful. And I Zoom with them and I coach them. Sometimes I'll see them in person. And sometimes if they need a treatment, I'll give them a chiropractic treatment to help calm their body or relax them. I'm about mind, body. Another thing with the knowledge, journaling, meditation is people have to get moving. People have to get exercising. Movement is freedom. Movement is medicine. Movement is blood oxygen. Movement is I am okay. So movement is another thing, and it's exercise. So I'll work with people on Zoom and kind of go to the gym with them. They'll have me in their earphones and they'll be on the treadmill and they'll be hurting. And I'll be like, you're hurting because why? And we'll talk it through. So I love teletherapy and I love Zoom. It really changed our world, Zoom. So I work with people all over the world. I'm very blessed. And I say to them, after this 8-week recovery program, you're on your own. Because basically you're going to live your life and be triggered and you're going to be able to understand now what every symptom means. Because every symptom is speaking something. And I know that sounds woo-woo, but I just had 2 doctors talking about that. So I'm supporting the woo-woo, because the symptoms are speaking. And so you're not going to feel like, oh, what is this symptom? What is this pain? You're going to say, I figured it out. So I want people to be in the world. So I kind of coach them in a very intense coaching program. Sometimes we spread it out. Sometimes we skip a week. And other times, some people are not for me. Like I'm not doing a lot of childhood trauma work. I'll delve into it and I'll send them to a childhood, trauma therapist. Some people need real energy work. I really believe this. I mean, energy is energy. And so energy work is a little different thing. So I co-manage with some coaches and will encourage and inspire and educate people to be their own doctor and their own therapist and support them in their life, just like what you're doing.
Absolutely incredible. Of course, this will all be linked in the description. So people take a moment, check it out. She's got an incredible channel, new content, so much new content every single week, so much help, so many insights. And I'm going to link here too. I did an interview recently with Dr. Howard Schubiner. So if you're listening and this approach, this mind body science is resonating, that's another great one to check out.
Dr. Schubiner, they're my teachers. Amazing.
Oh, wow. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Tovah. It's been so wonderful having you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. You're a great listener. And I'm going to contact you so you can be on my broadcast and I can interview you.
I can't wait. And thank you to everyone who's watching. And I hope to see you in this next interview with Dr. Schubiner.